Joining me on the news to discuss the aftermath of the AU summit and the row on Israel's observer status is Chrys Anyanwu, who is the Executive Director of Global Advocacy for African Affairs. I'm also being joined by Roshan, Dadoo, a Pan-African Palestine Solidarity Network member in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thanks for your time. And quickly here, let's start with you, Chrys. Let's take a look at one of the main topics of discussion at the AU summit. That's the wave of coups on the continent, which has left many member states suspended from the bloc. Now, but some say the suspension isn't enough deterrence. So what needs to be done to avert a repetition in other countries?
Thank you so much. Good evening. As a matter of fact, suspension isn't enough. But again, let's even take it to the grassroots. Coups don't just happen. Yes, I agree with a lot of our school of thought who believe there are overzealous military officers who want to have a taste of what a power looks like. But of course, deep down, you realize that coups most of the times happen when the government in power have lost their popularity and abandoning the reason why they were elected in the first instance. So these are some of the reasons why coups happen. Bad governance, insecurity, corruption, brutality, against civilians, and all manner. So these are the things that give room for the military to intervene in most cases, and that is what we've seen on this side, of the world. But again, you look at regional bodies like the African Union, on this side of the world, and you just ask yourself, have they actually done enough? People like Macky Sall, who just recently emerged as the chairperson of the African Union. A lot of people will tell you they don't envy him. The reason is not far-fetched. He's coming at a time, when the Union, the African Union, have been bedeviled with a lot of challenges that keep slowing down the pace of development. But again, we don't expect so much from him because over the years, the AU have actually existed on a wrong foundation, on a very faulty foundation. And that is why they have, over the years, have remained a toothless bulldog that can neither bark nor bite. So I think the whole thing is for the continent and the leaders in the continent to go back to the drawing board and initiate things that can actually work. If over the years we've consistently witnessed, I think in just West Africa, we've witnessed 4 in the last 18 months, 3 successful ones and 1 unsuccessful one. And yet all we do is to say we are suspending, and then they are still there. Yeah, we are suspending. The next day you witness another one. So I think we should begin to have a conversation on what works. And I think it should go beyond suspending, people to tackling the root causes of coups in Africa, and which is bad governance. Which is corruption, which is the fact that our leaders do not care for the people, which is the fact that people come to power and, deep down in the middle of the game, they want to change the rule of the game. It doesn't work.
Let me stay with you, Chrys, quickly. A quick one here. Let me stay with you, Chrys, before I go to Roshan. Uganda and Tanzania have been elected to be members of the African Union's Peace and Security Council. So what is the implication of this to ensuring peace in that region?
Anyway, for me, and this is just my personal opinion, I was impressed when Uganda was called into the council, and these are my reasons. You see, yes, actually, there's no doubt about that. Uganda typically represents, a country where abuse or violation of human rights and dictatorship is clearly evident. But again, if you look at the reasons, some of the reasons for this invitation, one among which is stability. Uganda has actually demonstrated that it can suspend stability over the years. And if you want to look at the countries surrounding Uganda, countries like DRC, countries like South Sudan, Kenya, Rwanda even. These are countries that have over the years witnessed one form of problem or the other, insurgency, conflict, just name it. except Uganda. And Uganda has also played a typical role, I mean, a very significant role in stabilizing some of these countries. So them coming into the council, I'm sure there is something they are bringing into the council that, that may change, they may bring, a change at the end of the day. So
let me quickly now, sorry, apologies. Apologies for butting in there. Let me quickly go to Roshan now. Roshan, once again, thanks for your time. Now, Israel's status as an observer at the AU was a bone of contention at the summit. Now, what's your take on the committee set up to review Israel's status?
Well, thanks very much for inviting us as the Pan-African Palestine Solidarity Network, of which the South African BDS Coalition is a member. Of course, we've been following closely since the outrageous, as you said, decision made by Moussa Faki to unilaterally allow an apartheid Israeli state to become an observer in the African Union. We've been following things closely. In October, the Executive Committee of the AU, made up of the foreign ministers, debated the issue. There wasn't a resolution in that meeting, and it was deferred to this now summit, the Heads of State Summit. And yesterday, to be quite honest, we're really disappointed that the AU, it just fails to live up to its foundational principles and values. It's very clear in both the Constitutive Act and in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which we shouldn't forget. It clearly commits the African Union to fighting against colonialism, apartheid, racism, and Zionism. So it's clear that allowing an apartheid Israeli state into the AU as an observer is totally in contradiction. And just following on from what the previous speaker was saying, some of the countries he listed, Rwanda, Kenya, DRC, Uganda, are strangely or not strangely, the very countries that refuse to speak out against Israeli observer status. And the fact that there has been an increase in coups is no real coincidence if you think of the fact that Israeli military expenditure to Africa has increased by 309% in the last decade. So if we're buying weapons as well as spyware, we've seen the scandals of Israeli Pegasus spyware in our continent, even spying on our own heads of state, as well as on citizens, particularly journalists and human rights.
Roshan, if I may butt in here, your organization, in its statement, revealed that Israeli military exports to Africa have increased by 309% in the last decade, and that you discovered that authoritarian regimes use Israeli Pegasus spyware in Africa. And now you just try to also link the coups that we've been seeing around, the subcontinent. Do facts back these statements?
Well, I would say so. I mean, the statistic of increased military expenditure, the Pegasus scandal has been in the news all over the continent, all over the world. Even America has now banned the use of NSO products, which Pegasus is one of. So I think it very clearly does. It also makes sense if you look at the way in which the meeting yesterday went. It was quite a day of confusion for everybody, including for the heads of state, because the decision in the morning that we welcomed to set up the committee, as you mentioned, and for Israel to be suspended in its observer status until this committee had come to some conclusions, had deliberated and come up with recommendations. Strangely, by the evening, when the decisions were supposed to be reflected and made public, suddenly there was a change in that meeting in the evening. Rather than accepting the decision of the morning, some countries started raising up the debates all over again. And the issue there was that Israel should not be suspended whilst this committee is looking into a resolution. So on the one hand, we welcomed the fact that the committee was set up, that it didn't come to the point of a vote which would have split the AU It would have gone against the principles of deciding by consensus, and it would have been a very deep and severe split that would have affected the AU beyond the issue of Israel's observer status. But on the other hand, we were very disappointed that there was an underhand, in a sense, way of changing that decision. And clearly there'd been a lot of lobbying from the apartheid state on specific countries during the afternoon, because you could see people were already posting on Twitter and putting out statements.
Roshan, quickly, let me bring in Chrys here before we go. Chrys, let's take a look at the new AU chairperson, Senegal's President Macky Sall. What are the changes you expect to see from him as he steers the AU ship for the next year?
Well, if you listen to his acceptance speech, he clearly emphasized the need to stem the tide of unconstitutional, changes of government in Africa. He also made mention of, protection of environment, health, as well as economic and social development. But again, he also, I think he also emphasized, the need to, tackle the issue of refugees, IDPs, and, build a culture of mediation and dialogue, as a mechanism to, actually tackling the issues of conflict and crisis. But again, in addition, I think there is also the issue of the pandemic, that he has to. So these are some of the, challenges that are actually well cut out for him. And we expect that he tackles this headlong. But again, like we have always maintained, AU chairpersons, don't really, I feel for them actually, because AU actually on its own was founded on a very wrong footing.
Well, I think I'm afraid I'm out of time. Chrys Anyanwu and Roshan Dadoo, many thanks for speaking with us on this. We'll hope to stay on this, Roshan, and we'll come back to your group and draw more from your findings on what's happening around that subcontinent. Many thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.